A great turnout. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Robert Pinnock. I work for Surfray, and I've been working with search for a long time. And I'm also very, very pleased to have Miles Kehoe today to do a presentation for us on improving search using the pipeline in Fast Search for SharePoint. Really exciting stuff. I'd like to say just briefly a couple of things about Miles. I have been working in enterprise search, worked with several different search engines for over a decade now. And even before I started, I knew of Miles as one of the experts in enterprise search. And now, of course, one of the foremost experts in Fast Search for SharePoint. So I am especially personally pleased to have the opportunity to present here with Miles today. Miles is also the owner of a company called New Idea Engineering that I would like to point out. You can see the link on the bottom of this slide. New Idea Engineering is a very well-known and respected search consulting company. So if you have any interest in search, enterprise search consulting, business practice, development, anything around enterprise search, please do go and check out their website. Miles has a personal blog on there with great information. You can also see his other details here. This webinar is part of our Surfray webinar series. We have other webinars available on YouTube and on our site, so please do also come and check out surfray.com. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Miles and let him get started. Miles, please.
Hi there, Robert. Thanks a lot. Wow, what an introduction. I don't know how I can live that one down. I guess I graduated to be one of the senior fellows in search or something like that. I don't know quite how that happens. But let's go ahead and get started here. By the way, I should add one thing Robert didn't say. We are actually Surfray partners. We're a company that's been around for quite a while, and Surfray makes some very, very good products. We've known them for quite a while. In fact, Robert and Josh Noble have written the other book on search that we'll talk about. So real quickly, what we're going to do today, probably take about a half an hour, do a quick introduction to New Idea Engineering. There's not much more I can say about myself, and Robert's embarrassed me this morning, but we'll talk about when Fast Search for SharePoint makes sense versus Search Server. What is this Fast Search for SharePoint indexing pipeline, and more importantly, why is it important to you? And then, of course, how do you use it? And then we'll wrap up. We'll take questions and answers. You can actually ask questions of Robert and I with the message chat board there. As they come in, we'll take a look, but we'll probably answer them at the end of the session. So having said that, let's get started. I'm one of the founders of New Idea Engineering. We're a small search consultancy, as Robert said. I've been working with enterprise search. This makes me feel much older now. Since 1989 was when I first went to work for Verity. A couple of years later, I met Mark Bennett, my business partner here, through a recruiter. Hired him into Fast, and when I moved from tech support manager to consulting manager, he became the tech support manager. And at some point in time, after we'd been there 4 or 5 years, we decided it was time. In 1996, we decided to start our own company. And along the way, we weren't sure what we'd do, but we figured out along the way we'd help companies figure out how to make Verity work, and very quickly found out that people needed help making UltraSeek work, or Autonomy DRE, which is the earlier version of IDLE. And since then, we've been helping sort of with business and the technology side of search. We've worked with Fast for a number of years, Fast ESP, which is the predecessor to the current Fast line. And when they were acquired by Microsoft, we realized that if we didn't write the book, someone else would and would be upset. So we wrote a professional Microsoft search to talk specifically about the Fast search products in SharePoint, much like Josh and Robert's book that you'll see a flash of later in the search server side, which is an excellent book too, by the way. And we do author some blogs. We have the Enterprise Search blog, and we also have Search Components Online, which is where we'll talk about low-cost and no-cost add-ins or search products that you can use. And as Robert said, I'm an overall search nerd. We've been doing this since 1989 and have always tried to be the Switzerland of search consulting firms so that we can help companies figure out what they need, not just what product we happen to represent. So the question is, when should you use Fast Search for SharePoint as opposed to Search Server, which is, of course, comes with the product? Well, there's some good reasons why Fast is valuable there. First of all, SharePoint Search indexes 100 million documents. That may sound like a lot, but in fact, there are some companies we've worked with now that have more content than the Internet had 10 years ago, in 2001. Some companies are adding tens of thousands of documents a day, and It's impressive. I think being in the disk drive business is probably better than being in the search business, but they're really growing quickly. Fast search, much like its predecessor, Fast ASP, is virtually unlimited. Microsoft has tested 650 million documents in tests, and the way they do that is with what are called rows and columns. If you need more queries, you add more rows. If you need more content, you add more columns, and basically that's the way that looks. And essentially, the real benefit to Fast is its predictable scalability. If you say, I know I have this many documents, this many queries a second, you can actually know how many server instances you're going to have to have out there. The other reason to use Fast Search for SharePoint is when you really need to fine-tune the index and the search. And that's search is sort of a rocket science trick. It works out of the box, but no one makes it work quite as well as Google. And what Fast helps you do is have the fine-tuned control you need that if with the right management ongoing, you can actually make it work pretty well. And they do that basically through the indexing pipeline, which we'll talk about for the rest of the seminar. And when you need custom relevance profiles and to fine-tune queries. And what those are, custom relevance profiles essentially let you assign different weights to different parameters based on who the person is, so that your marketing people can tend to see documents that are more relevant for marketing people versus R&D people seeing documents that are more technical. Or in fact, for example, if you've got offices in New York and Los Angeles, the people in Los Angeles can actually see content that's closer to them, that's in the Los Angeles area, versus it won't exclude New York, but it'll rank LA higher. And for fine-tuning queries, that's something that's really, when it's important, it's important. We did a project several years ago for one of the big four consulting firms, and to their point of view, if a document had a term in the abstract, that document was very, very important. So with Fast, you can do things like that. You can say, I want when the words occur in the abstract, the document's more important than if it just shows up somewhere in the body. So when you need that kind of fine-tuning, Fast Search is a good way to go. So what is the indexing pipeline? Well, it's something that every search engine actually does, but none of them expose it as well as Fast does. It's a sequence of steps that you have to go through from having a raw binary document, an Office document, or a PDF document, and converting it into text, which is what the search engine needs. So some of the things that happens are format conversion. After the format conversion, you have to figure out what language it is so you know which stemming to apply. Lemmatization is a fancy algorithm that's used accomplishes much of what stemming does. The pipeline has also stages to entity extraction, which is the ability to recognize people, places, and things in the body of text and actually pull those out as crawled and then managed properties, which you can then use in refiners. So you don't actually have to have metadata if you can figure out where these entities live inside of the document. What's really unique to Fast is the ability to insert your own custom code right into the Fast system pipeline. And there are some rules about it. It must be almost it's the second to last stage, just before the mapping happens between crawled properties and managed properties. You can do it. Microsoft wants you to use C#, but actually we found any code that uses standard in and standard out is okay. And as you'll see, we've got some examples of that later on. And it's time critical. Every document you index is going to go through this code that you've written. So you don't want to have it spending a lot of time, but it is a great way to fix up messy data. And let me show you. Basically, this is what the flow looks like, where you've got the data sources to the left, the crawler pulls in the data, passes it through for some content processing, passes the indexer, and builds an index. The user on the right side does queries against the index. Every search engine works this way, but inside of Fast Search for SharePoint, you see down at the bottom the pipeline down there. And again, every search engine is doing this deep down inside, but you see a document comes into the format converter, does language check. There's many more stages that happen there, but the trick to Fast is that you can actually put in your own stage. And they'd like it to be right near the end. As you'll see, that's actually not quite as required as they say. But what that lets you do is some things like marking up documents. Why? Content is messy. You'll get URLs that, for historical purposes, are cryptic. You'll find you have some metadata associated with a document you'd like to use from an external source. You might want to look up a stock price if you see a particular ticker symbol going by. Or you can geotag documents. For every city you find, you can insert a geotag, longitude and latitude for it. And there's a stage that's really nice for identifying bad or missing metadata. And a little bit of repetition of that. Here's some examples. A lot of times, I'm sure if you look around on the web, public sites a little less, but On internet sites, you'll probably find that some of your URLs are kind of cryptic. You'll have MKT when in fact it's marketing content, prod management. So what the pipeline lets you do is write a stage that says, well, if I see MKT in the URL, I want to associate the word marketing with this document. And the same with product management. So I can put that stuff in. You can also add some really valuable metadata. We've seen these used before where if a document has a person's name in there, it can look up the person's phone number and email and associate those two with the document. Probably even the reverse is true. If I see an email address, I can look out and put the person's name in there, so I'll find the document even if they don't put their name in it. And another one that a lot of people do, especially in e-commerce or whenever there's a need to know where things are going on, is you can actually take a city name when you find it and look up a geotag location, give it a latitude and longitude, so that in FAST you can do find me something that's near where I am. That's one of the advanced query features. So that's all some cool stuff to do. And then the other thing is, if you're indexing stuff and you're sure you're indexing it right and it still doesn't work, one of the old sayings is, if you're sure it's right and it still doesn't work, something you're sure of is wrong. What FAST has is a capability in there, it's called the SPY stage, that's actually built in and easy to enable, that basically would show you everything that the search engine is about to put into the search engine, so you can actually see how it's parsed, where things are going wrong, and that's sometimes very good to have. Now, how do you use the pipeline? Well, there are two files, two XML files involved in the configuration. They're both in the FAST search directory. In fact, on the FAST, default it's called FAST search, but it's an environment variable called FAST search as well. So if it's installed someplace else, that's where it'll be. But these two files are all you need to worry about to do custom pipeline work. To do it, basically, you need to add a new processor, basically a new chunk of code for it to process it, and then tell it where to insert it in the code. And then when it's all set, you restart the FAST processor with a command line there. The methodology, of course, is once you do that, you want to submit a single known document, Spider 1 document or insert 1 document, and look to make sure you're getting it right. I hate to do 100,000 documents to find out you're mistaken. Just to prove to you it really is findable, you see here's one of our servers. This is a server in the FAST search directory in the etc. subdirectory, and you've got two files there. You can look in those two files and edit. You can see the pipeline config is a lot larger than the extensibility, which is how you define your stages. And that's why I'll show you the entire extensibility file, but just snippets of the pipeline config file. So to add the processor stage, in this pipeline config file, you're going to enter, there's a section of processors. You're going to enter a process. And this is, I'm showing you a SPY 1 process, which is essentially cloning the SPY process that's already there. You define the name of the class, what kind of parameters you're going to give it. And then a little farther down in that file, there's a section called document conversion. There are two different pipeline stages. One is the Office 14 pipeline, which is the default, and there's an attachments pipeline, which processes document attachments like email. And presumably you'd want to put this in the Office 14 process, so you do that there. And then, as I said, reset the document processor modes. Now the magic, here's what's going to happen. During the process, when the pipeline extensibility is called, when your stage gets called, FAST passes you an XML file which has all the data it's gotten to that point in the pipeline, all the crawled properties it's fetched. They're not managed properties yet. It's going to run your code on that input file, and then it'll tell you where to put the output file. So it knows where you want to come in, you fetch that, and you put the stuff out where it expects it, and there you go. That's all it takes, small matter programming. Here's a sample of what a pipeline extensibility mode would look like. And again, it's a very short file because you're only going to get one of these. You define what your program's name is and the fact that you're going to pass the input and output files. And then you can input different properties, author in this case. In this case, I'm saying give it an author. I want to put some tags on and put a phone number in there afterwards. And again, I keep saying be sure to reset it because that's the step that everybody forgets. You get everything so nice and pretty, you index the document, it's not working, you forgot to reset the document. That's basically what reloads the pipeline configurations. So you can see it's relatively easy to do this. There are some, obviously the pipeline performance is critical, and this runs in a sandbox. It's not the sandbox quite that they use in Office 365, because you find that file I/O is only allowed in that user fast app data local low area. That's the only place you can write. That's where your content will be, and that's where you've got to put it back. SharePoint makes sure that no stage in the pipeline runs longer than 10 seconds. If your program takes longer than 10 seconds to run, fast is going to kill you and it'll go on to the next document. Permissions are restricted regardless of who your fast server user permissions are. No matter where you say the fast service user has access, SharePoint restricts where you can actually put stuff, and that is in that local load directory. Now, to remember here, each item passes through a document processor one at a time. You can have 4, 5, or 10 document processors, but consider if your code takes 1 second to run, 10 document processors can process at best 10 documents a second. And given that, you're going to be looking for 100,000 documents in about 3 hours. So you can see if you take 8 or 9 seconds for your code to run, you're looking at slowing down your indexing quite a bit. So that's something you want to make sure you optimize for speed there. Some hints in the pipeline. The Microsoft supports only a single stage. That is in the pipeline config. They only want you to put one in there, and they would like it to be just before the mapper. Our experience is you can put stages other places as well, but you can only, things get added into the pipeline further down the stage as you go, so it really doesn't make a lot of sense until you're right toward the end there. One thing is, though, you can put, well, I'll get back, .NET languages. Microsoft supports C# and so forth. Custom stages can appear at multiple places. So, for example, the example of the SPY stage, sometimes you want to have a SPY stage just before the synonyms are applied, and just after, and you can compare to see what's actually happening in there. That's kind of convenient, and that is something that works. And we've found, again, C#, C++ work, but we've also found that things like VBScript and even command files work. In fact, on our blog, we've got a document that goes back about 3 or 4 years that shows how you can use a fast stage from an MS-DOS command file and a bad file using nothing but echo, which is kind of an interesting little challenge to try to implement. Not very fast, of course, but it's going to work. One of the nice things is this is limiting your file I/O, but it's not going to limit what you can make, what calls you can make web calls if you want. And in fact, if you're going to have some processing that's heavy-duty processing time, what we recommend is you keep your web service where it is, but rather than do file I/O or any processing, you can make call-outs to a web service, which then can return the data. So this is a really great thing to do if you've got, for example, if you're doing database access. You want to keep the database open, not have to open and close the database each time you run. So with a web service, you can go out and do that and get your data back that way. So when processing time is of the essence, this is a good way to do it. This leads actually into an interesting thing. Now that you've gone through, you've seen all the effort of trying to get this working right, I will tell you that Surfray is working on a new product that will be out soon. Robert, do you want to say a few things about that?
Sure. Thanks very much, Miles. Yeah, we have a product called Ontolica Fast Management, and the goal of this product, like many of the other products that we've produced, is just to make the administration a little bit easier of things. And as people who have worked with Fast know that there are some things that you need to do on an ongoing basis to keep Fast running smoothly, do backups, manage your pipeline extensions, do some configuration that are a little bit cumbersome, and you have to go into files. So this product, and if you're interested, you know, of course, you can get a free trial from us so you can see the exact workings of it and how it works for you. But this product's goal is just to match those needs of doing things a little bit easier and managing those ongoing a little bit easier. So please do visit our site and sign up for a trial of it, and we'll give you a demo and a free trial, no problem. Back to you, Miles.
Very good. All right, well, I must have talked a lot faster than I thought I was going to, because this normally would take an extra 5 or 10 minutes, but we've actually reached the end. I'd like to give you some additional resources. One is the slide deck is live now at the URL you see there, actually on the Surfray site, but I put a bitmap there. There's some excellent blogs. Eric Belay, I found his excellent blog on Blogspot, and has a number of examples of things you could do in the pipeline. Our enterprise search blog, Lana Sousa runs a really good site, Search Unleashed. There's the ESW log, which has got some good content. Of course, TechNet, MSD, and of course, Surfray, which Robert and Josh both run. And with that, those are our contact points again. You've got Robert there. Let's go to questions.
Great. We have a question from Dave E. What are some real-world examples where you would create some customizations for the fast pipeline? Do you have some anecdotes from your experience, Miles, that you can tell us about the different extensions that you guys have built and what their value were?
Oh, absolutely. So, in fact, some of those examples were up there. Quite frequently, people want to geotag their content. You might have either businesses with local addresses that you can actually look up the geotag for, or even just geotagging a city so you can place it on a map. That's critical because very frequently in an e-commerce environment, people are going to want to find a store near me or find an outlet that you've got near me. And to do that, you need to pick up their longitude and latitude, but you also have to have the contents tagged. So that's kind of a real-world example. The other one is the ability to be able to add metadata. And one of the examples I gave there was where people have, if there's a person's name in the documents, they actually did want to pull up some information about them, which office they're in, and what their email address was. So it's the sort of thing where you've got data that's not as clean as you'd like, that's a good place to do it. And since this happens after the entity extraction stage, it's easy because you've got that entity extracted data as well. One final thing people will sometimes do is take as an opportunity to clean up what the entity extraction stage has come up with. Fast Search for SharePoint uses a white list and a black list, so you can actually specify which names you want to include. But if you find one that you've decided for this document is not relevant, you can pull names out, so it can manipulate the data that the crawler has found. And as I said, pulling data out when you decided you didn't want it after the fact is not a bad thing to do.
I can actually just add a little anecdote to that. I just came back from a customer who has a site where people have to enter their postal code in order to get the specific content that is valuable to them. But their pages didn't actually have the information on them about who was allowed to see each one. So they could do that with the pipeline, inject the particular postal codes that each one of those users that each one of those pages would allow for those users into the pages. And then they don't even have to display those to the users on the pages. They just get those in the pipeline and into the search index. So powerful stuff. We have another question, Miles. You mentioned that there are two pipelines. The person asks, can I spawn a new pipeline for certain file types or content sources?
I think the answer is no. I suspect you can. I've never run into anyone who needs it. In terms of for different content, that would be interesting. I have to say, I don't know the answer to that. I can look that up. If you'd like to send Robert or I a note, I'll follow up on that. Fast is an incredibly flexible machine, so probably somewhere down inside there is a way to do that.
I think from my experience, that secondary pipeline would be a extension of your pipeline extension, wouldn't it, Miles? Which means that if you did that, you would still have that 10-second limit on whatever you're processing before you return to the original pipeline. Or am I understanding that incorrectly?
I think you're correct there. The trick is, though, once it goes through the document identification, if you could trick that first stage into thinking it's a text file or whatever that you'll do processing with later, but typically you would run it. I suspect it wouldn't be supported, but you may well be able to do that by inserting a phase even before the document format recognition. I never tried that before. Never tried to break it that badly.
If you have a specific case in mind, please do feel free to send Miles an email, and we'll make sure he can give you some best practice recommendation on your particular use case.
Absolutely.
Are there other questions appearing? Anyone have any other questions for us?
No, Robert, one of the things that the first question reminded me of, there was a case we worked on several years ago, a customer who had both a collection of data that was both public and private, and their web server would filter out who got to see it, which makes it very tough for search engines. Essentially, it was a sports site, and they were feeding directly from the bug database. Comments were only allowed to be seen by internal people, but people on the outside could see anything. So the web server would decide when it's sending the documents out which tags to allow to go out. That's hard for a search engine if you can't actually limit things. And in this sense, you could actually pull aside the things that are in the document and put them in a field that you're not going to show people. So that if you've got some content that needs to go out or you don't want going there, or in fact if you've got some redaction software. One of the things that one of our other partners called, one of our other partners has this capability to do, it's Pingar, and they have the ability to do redaction. You can actually process things in there and redact documents as well. So that's another real-world kind of environment where things happen.
Cool. So I don't see any other questions just at this moment. Please do enter them in the Q&A section or the chat. Either one would be fine. We'll just wait a few minutes to see if anyone has anything interesting to ask us. If you don't think of it now, but you think of it later, please do feel free to contact us and visit our sites for extra information. I also wanted to mention one blog that is a friend of mine and a co-author of an upcoming book we're working on. It's called Tech and Me by Mikael Svensson. It's got some really great information on FAST. It's really more technical, developer-oriented content. So please do check it out if you're working with FAST. It will help you a lot. Someone asks us, what is the cost of FAST for SharePoint? I think that's a great question for you to address, Miles, above licensing costs.
Sure. Well, there's good news and bad news. The server price is along the lines of $20K per server, I think, and which is not bad compared to the fact that the old FAST used to be $300,000 to $400,000. What Microsoft's done, though, is that they've actually added the requirement that everyone have ECALs. So the ECAL client access license can be very, very expensive if you're a big company, not so expensive if you're not. We actually had one customer who asked us if we thought they should upgrade or not, and knowing how much customization we had done when we implemented FAST originally, I said, well, there's trade-offs there. It turns out for their company, the ECALs were going to cost along the lines of $1.5 million. So that's a pretty steep jump from $60,000 a year they were paying for maintenance now to the price they'd have to pay if they moved up. So,
can you just also add, because I think this is interesting for people too, what the range of consulting costs are around FAST for SharePoint, and then maybe more importantly, what the expected ROI, return on investment, is for FAST for SharePoint? Because I know these costs can seem very large to a lot of people, especially if you add consulting costs on top of licensing costs. But if you weigh that with the ROI, then you start to see why FAST is so important. So
exactly.
Can you address those two issues?
Sure, put me on the spot here, yeah. Basically, one of the things, ROI is really hard to judge in most search applications. If you're working on an internal enterprise site, the question is, how much more productivity will you get if people can find things 20% better? And it's real hard to say. I've seen some of the analysts who publish studies and say, well, we find that knowledge workers spend 60% of their time doing search, and if you're paying them $100,000 a year, that means you're paying $60,000 a year for search. Well, I think how much for the 100,000 employees, you think of how much money you'll save for only, whatever. I never believe those numbers because I think the original surveys were flawed. When you ask someone, how much time do you spend looking for stuff, unless you specifically say, on the Internet using search, you're going to get answers. I talked to my boss last week, and Charlie over in accounting knows. I don't believe people spend 60% of the time looking for stuff. So it's a real hard ROI unless you're in two particular environments. That is e-commerce, where you can actually tell that you're saving an extra $100,000 a month because of the number of extra sales, the products you can promote. And the other one, of course, is e-discovery, where it's critical that you find each and every instance of everything. It's more of a soft ROI, and the questions you ask are around how important is it that your customer support reps can answer customers, find the answers real quickly. What happens if a salesman has to recreate a proposal that's almost identical to the proposal one of your guys in a different office did 2 months ago? What about in R&D, you've got a concept for a new project that's going on, but for all you know, the Korean subsidiary of your company might have a very similar project in the works as well. How expensive is that going to be if you have a team in Korea starting a project, funding it, and you don't find out to the end of the year that you've done the same thing? So it's very much a soft ROI. What FAST brings over, say, other search engines, including Search Server, is this ability to really fine-tune the relevancy. And while you can change rank relevancy globally in SharePoint, it's kind of a little-known secret, I think, it's a little harder to do. And very frequently, you want to be able to do things like assign where search server assigns title a higher weight than body. Sometimes you might have an abstract field that you want to apply, or you want to say if a term is in the URL, give it a special weight, or if these two words are near each other, count it even higher. And that kind of fine-tuning really lets you decide who's going to see what and what order. So I think, it's really the kind of thing you really need to decide if it's going to be worthwhile. The trick is that after our belief is after a certain point of capability, it's the methodology of running search more than which platform you have. Now, quite honestly, I think one of the methodologies you need to have is the ability to tweak the search queries. You need to provide weights to say, I want to count the abstract more importantly, the date's not as important to me as the author, things like that. So I think Fast Search for SharePoint has that. And then the question is how, but for any search engine you use, it's how do you manage it that really makes it successful or not. Now, in terms of how much the consulting costs vary, I've seen very, very wide ranges. I've seen everything from $190 an hour, $125 an hour to $400 an hour. I think it depends who you've got and what they're doing. I know in our experience, longer projects are less expensive per unit time, but you really need to have an idea that out of any consulting engagement, I think you as a company want to make sure that you've learned in-house what you need to do to keep things going. We always try to focus that. We would rather go into a shorter project, teach people what they need to know, and then have them call every now and then they need help, rather than continue every time they need to change, have to bring us back in. Some other companies do differently. I don't know.
Just to pitch your book a bit, Miles, one thing that you'll find in Professional Microsoft Search, Miles' book, and I think these are the parts of the book that you're probably responsible for, Miles, that you won't find in my book. My book is specifically about SharePoint search, but there's a lot of information in Professional Microsoft Search about the business side of search and the enterprise search, and how to build a search, I think you call it a center of excellence, where you can learn about search and learn about how your organization needs to use search. And I think that's very valuable information. So please do pick up Miles' book. Now, we have another question. Mm-hmm. And this is really not so much of a question as well, I guess it is a question, that the person who asks it has heard about the processing pipeline and also heard about tools named Content Transformation Service and Interactive Management Service included in Fast ESP. Can I get those tools for FS4 SP? Now, I understand that these tools were part of the Fast Search for Internet Service or Internet Search that was a product that was available from Microsoft, which is no longer available. What do you know about that, Miles?
Wow. Well, it was it was actually introduced not long. In fact, it was not out when we were writing the book, so we didn't need to write too much about it. But it's the new incarnation of a project that FAST had that was called the Endeca Killer, way back when. Those of you who want the inside secrets. The idea is that it was going to be easier to make the content and the user experience easier. I had not heard that they're not offering it anymore. It seemed silly to me that it was available only for the FSIS versus FSIA for internal applications. I do know, my guess, I don't know this, but my expectation, I think those two things just make perfect sense inside of a search engine, and I suspect that some version of that is going to survive into the next version of search that comes out, maybe, 2012 or 2013. And the reason is there's so much going on in e-commerce where you actually need to manage the experience. And one of the things that happens there, for example, you want to say, all right, well, you want a business line manager to be able to say, all right, starting Monday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, anyone who searches for camera needs to see this particular line of camera. It has to be in stock, and it has to be in stock, available, meet the user's criteria, and it's got to be, if it's between Monday and Friday, it's got to be a Canon because I'm getting an extra 2 cents commission on placing those this week. So Endeca does that very well. That's something that FAST really wanted to do, and I think that's what CTS and IMS will let you do. And I expect as they move more and more SharePoint to facing outside and for using for more public-facing sites, I suspect to get into e-commerce, they're going to need something like that. So I really had not heard they had stopped selling that now, which is sort of too bad. But I think that's going to be an important part of next generation search.
Yeah, it disappeared from the price list in August, and we, because we're authoring this new technical manual, have been told that it's not part of
one of the things that Robert didn't mention, by the way, is Robert and I guess Josh have a book coming out soon called Working with Microsoft Fast for SharePoint 2010, which A-Press is going to have out pretty soon now. I think that's going to be a pretty good book, too. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So don't just let them push our book. We appreciate having them mentioned there, but Robert's got another book coming out, too, so keep an eye out for that for sure.
It's actually myself and Mikael Svensson and Marcus Johansson, who are two Swedish guys who have worked with Compario. Mikael works for PuzzlePart, and they are the ultra tech fast experts. So it's a Microsoft Press book.
Compario is right next door to Fast over in Norway. So
yeah. So we're hoping to have it out in early next year, but it'll be very, very developer-oriented book. So I don't see any other questions, so I think we've gone over our time, so we should wrap it up today. I'd like to thank you very much for the presentation today, Miles. It was excellent and a nice addition to our webinar series. If any of the attendees want to ask extra questions, please do feel free to ask either of us questions and come to our sites, check out our stuff, and good luck with your fast.
Great. Thanks much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.